of the session? Because we weren't actually originally supposed to do this. That's not the title of this session.
It's
this
an AMA.
This is Ask Mark Anything.
And we are not Mark Davis.
So we are all virtual. We are virtual Mark.
Yeah, but we decided that to replace Mark, it takes a village. So we are the village.
Yes.
Plus all of you who know stuff about this that we don't know. So
this is a chance to ask anything you might be interested in knowing about, well, anything that has to do with Unicode. Or life, the universe, and everything. But maybe we'll limit our answers to things related to Unicode. So there are microphones at the back. We'd ask you to use those microphones. And we didn't have anything queued up for us to respond to initially. But maybe we should start with some introductions. So
maybe intros and how long you've been around this crazy space.
Sure. So I'm Peter Constable, and I work for Microsoft, and I have been involved with Unicode since, I don't know, around 2000-ish, something like that.
I'm Cathy Wissink. I'm currently affiliated with the Unicode Consortium. Prior to that, I spent 24 years at Microsoft doing diverse and sundry. Before that, I spent about 6-7 years as a consultant for Microsoft, working on the first set of Unicode enablement for things like Windows NT. So I've been around this since about 1991, and there's a bunch of you probably who weren't even born then, so I'll make myself feel real old right there.
I haven't been around quite that long, but I was born before 91. And my name is Markus Scherer. I work for Google. I used to work for IBM, where I got hired into the ICU team in 1999. So I've been actively working on this for about 26 years. I learned about Unicode in 97 on a previous project where we shockingly translated, localized into 10 different languages. So that was pretty good at the time. And we try to figure out how to make multiple languages work in a server.
Okay. Is this on?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I'm Annemarie Apple. I also work for Google. I guess I started probably, in 2015, but in Unicode more like 2020, probably. I don't know. I studied languages, so here I am. Languages. Yay.
So we happened to get picked to be the village that replaced Mark because we're all involved in some aspect of leadership within the Unicode Consortium. But the Unicode Consortium involves many other people than just us. There are others that could have been here, but we were the suckers that got pulled in to be on this panel. So this is Ask Us Anything, and so I'll invite people to go to the microphones and ask us questions. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Aniket. I'm from Coupa. I work in the globalization team. This might be a very basic question. Towards the end of Block's session, one of the themes that came out was, and I think you started that thought that Unicode needs to have an initiative where we build probably an AI enabled workflow or some a better way for developers to do better I-18N coding, especially for the ones that are not I-18N engineers. So initiatives like these, how do I know if such initiatives are ongoing at Unicode and like they are on the back burner, but how do I track them, and how do I what's the process to get involved?
That's a good question, and probably one that there's several different answers that we could be giving, and we probably should. I'll just start with a general thought about the nature of those projects. Going back to the starting of Unicode, before Unicode existed, different software companies were handling encoding of text in different ways. And sometimes national governments, national standards bodies would come up with a particular convention for how to encode. And that starts to get expensive for engineering when you have to start supporting lots of different things. And yet the different encodings of text was not something that companies would compete against one another on. And they realized, you know what, we could all save a lot of money and difficulty if we collaborated together to create one encoding that we can all use. And then it becomes cheaper for us to create our own software, and it becomes easier for data to move between different environments, which is a real need. And so in all of these things, to start a project, like I was suggesting in that session, and Bob Jung responded to me, he said, interesting idea, but for us to do something like that, we need volunteers. And you need to have different companies or individual, it could be a large company, it could be a small company, but you need companies to come to a point of deciding we can benefit ourselves and we can contribute to society in a way if we collaborate with others on a project. So that's sort of a general background on how do these things ever get started. CLDR got started because companies realized, you know what, this would save us a lot if we worked together on this. ICU got started in a similar way. The other part of your question was, how do I know about what's going on, or how do I discover if something new is going on, and how can I start contributing? So I will let others respond to other parts of this.
Okay, so the direct answer is we don't currently have an effort like that. We just talked about it here. We've talked also internally about efforts of doing linting and trying to figure out how to do things well. In my mind, actually, a lot of times a group, a person, an organization, a company gets something started and then takes it into Unicode or takes it into open source and tries to get people to contribute, people to adopt, people to help with maintaining and things. Even Unicode itself started as a Xerox project, really. Xerox with Strohbecker, then got Apple involved, and then got IBM and library groups and database companies involved. And that formed the nucleus of the early efforts and the consortium. ICU was originally a project by a joint venture between Apple and IBM mostly. That got then open sourced, then moved to Unicode years later. CLDR actually was spun off from ICU, but we desperately wanted feedback from other companies and other contributors on the locale data. A recent example is the inflection working group, where a large chunk of the work of the code that is in there right now got contributed by Apple. So that there was a communal desire to do something. There wasn't really a competitive advantage. We just wanted to have multiple companies work together. So we could start something under Unicode, or we could have someone who started working on this basically turn this into a community project. Either way could work. But as always, we can't expect Unicode to magically make things happen, right? There are people in Unicode that make things happen. There are organizations that sponsor work, that either let people spend their time on a project or fund monetarily other people doing the work. I think Toril said we have 3.5 employees. Those 3.5 employees don't really do the work of the standards committees and figuring out how to do this stuff. Most of the work happens in Unicode because Google and Microsoft and Apple and other companies are letting people do things for the benefit of their own company as well as everyone else, or sponsoring money for certain contract work, especially in CLDR, where that has been a successful model. So this is something that's in scope, but we don't currently have a project, and I'm encouraging you and other organizations to think about what would make sense.
I see. Okay. So I'm guessing any such projects are usually time boxed, and then if someone had to contribute, they have to have a certain velocity, like they have to spend a certain hours per week or every month.
It depends a lot. Some people basically spend full time or half time or 20% time on certain Unicode things. It also often goes up and down with release cycles and other work going on. In terms of a project as such, usually the things that end up in Unicode become long-term projects. Sometimes we have an effort that lasts a year or two, like we had with security in source code, that produced a standard and had a revision or two, and then it was basically done. But a lot of these things run for decades.
So Unicode website doesn't have like a list of ongoing projects or anything like that?
We have a list of working groups and what they work on.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. Thank you. I think I got my answer.
And there's the technical committees.
Yes. And we have a list of technical committees and working groups, and we have a little bit of an overview, and then they link to the specific websites for those groups and committees.
Cool. I'll go and explore more on the website. Thank you.
Yeah, one of the way that Unicode is communicating externally for things like this definitely could be improved. And one of the challenges for Unicode is that there are actually several different audiences that Unicode needs to be able to speak to. And so it's been a long-term challenge figuring out how do we organize content on the Unicode website so that it's easily discoverable and accessible for very different audiences. And that's not something that, as mentioned, there's only 3.5 full-time staff in the consortium that are just doing administrative work. So at some point, you are looking to volunteers to help in organizing the information. And so definitely things that could be improved. And one thing that you could be doing is connecting with people that are involved to just try to find out more if you've got specific questions, like some of us that are more involved in the ongoing projects. If you got specific questions, you can come and ask us. There is a Slack channel. Not everybody is necessarily a fan of Slack, but there is a Unicode Slack channel where you could ask questions. There's not an unreasonable chance that somebody will answer your question. So hopefully there's something there that can be useful for you.
Thank you.
All right, this is a question that I've been curious about for a very long time. So when I look at the Unicode code point space, it's broken up into planes, and there are 17 planes. And as a computer person, I know powers of 2 are important. 17 is not a power of 2. It's a prime number, in fact. So how did you guys come up with 17 planes?
You want to take that? No, I do not. Markus, do you want to take it?
I wasn't around at the time, but I think I have an answer for that question based on my own early forensics. Unicode started with a goal of not including anything under the sun, but encode things that were in modern use, and have a private use area, an area of a few thousand codes that were available for people to do what they wanted and needed. And this was patterned after other large character sets, like in Japan, where every publishing house has its own set of special characters for their own local community needs. So you encode the things that are generally standardized, and then you have this extra space. That didn't hold up, especially in terms of the merger with ISO, because we had two competing draft standards. We had an industry standard, we had also an ISO standard in development. The ISO standard had a much broader goal of encoding actually everything under the sun. And as we can see from Unicode 17, we have nearly 160,000 characters, which is way more than the Unicode people were planning for. They had made a plan, and if you can see that on the website, we have the Unicode 88 pamphlet, which is, 16 pages of this is our great new idea and our great new design, and this is how it can work out, and why 64,000 codes will be enough. And it included something like 16,000 or 20,000 maybe Chinese characters, and it included only 2,350 Korean syllables, and then dozens and dozens of scripts, and mostly focused on things that had already been encoded or were well understood for computer use. But ISO wanted to go beyond, and we now have, in fact, 100,000 characters just for the Chinese character set. So even that alone would have busted the limit that was set in the 90s. And so there was a compromise. The two committees got together. I think ISO had, at some point, basically allowed for hundreds of millions of codes. That was impractical. Unicode was at 64,000 initially. That was not enough. They decided to make a compromise, and in terms of the Unicode encoding, they basically said, okay, we set aside this range of special codes that you can use in combination. And there you get a power of 2 again, because you basically take a code from one range that gets you 10 free bits, and another code from another range that also gets you 10 free bits, that gets you 20 bits, you get 1 million codes, and that adds 16 planes to the one that we started with. So it's 1 plus 16, and there's your magic prime number. The other thing that we discovered is that it's impractical to rely on private use codes, because different companies, and in fact, between IBM and Adobe and Microsoft and several other companies, they came up with different ways of using different characters in a private use area, but then they weren't interoperable. And so for characters that can be standardized, we have since then leaned towards actually standardizing them. And that's also added lots of things.
Adding just a little color commentary from the early 90s on this. Microsoft had already gone down the path of implementing Unicode prior to the merger with ISO. And so having to rip that out and start over again was a complete pain. But with the perspective of 30 plus years at this point in time, it was absolutely the right thing to do. First of all, because we do have a single standard that works worldwide. The other thing is that if you're dealing with a lot of, say, governments, and they think of Unicode as an American standard. And so if you can go back to them and say, oh, well, it's also ISO 10646, there's a little less of an American imperialistic flavor on that. And so as painful as it was to do that merge, or undo the merge for those of us who had already kind of jumped the gun in terms of implementing it, it really worked out in the long run. But I don't know if it's worth a little bit of a song and dance in terms of how Unicode works with ISO, and that might be too nerdy for this. They might be a little early in the morning.
That's a little nerdy. If somebody asks a question, we can dive into it.
I want to add one bit. I mentioned this to some people yesterday. When I first joined the Unicode mailing list in '98, I thought, oh, this is a thing that I have no opinion on. I just went through the Unicode 2.0 book, which was the latest and greatest standard at the time, and I thought, Yes, the maximum code point is 10FFFF. What kind of a weird and stupid number is that? And I actually proposed on a mailing list, can we just lower it to FFFFF? That would be much nicer. I was very naive in those days, and I learned very quickly that that was about 8 or 10 years too late. But yes, I mean, it doesn't hurt to ask sometimes stupid questions because you learn things.
Hi. So yeah, how does ISO work with Unicode? No, I'm joking.
I did not pay you to tee up
Peter,
that
you
question.
stepped
Thank you.
into that.
No, my question is about ML. We've just seen, I mean, Shane talked about one of the first examples of bringing ML into ICU libraries. And I'm assuming this is going to happen more and more. So in terms of Unicode as a standard, what are we going to bring into Unicode to allow us to do ML? So are we going to bring in the data sets? Are we going to bring in how those data sets are processed and so on?
Thank you for this question. It's a great question, and I'm not going to ask, or I'm not going to answer the technical specifics, but I am going to talk more broadly about just standardization as a whole. And this is not just with regards to internationalization. This is cybersecurity, this is privacy, this is what have you in terms of standards. Standards always lag innovation. You never want to get in front of innovation. And in fact, sometimes we've gotten ourselves in trouble in terms of, you standardize something too early, and then, well, it's not exactly the direction that the industry went. And so I think for the most part, we're looking for signals. We had a very similar question at this conference last year, and we're like, we'll see what the industry brings us. I think based on like the content of this conference, we're starting to see some signals around that. So I'm going to defer to the folks who actually sit in the technical committees around this and see what their thoughts are. But it could be really early days because you never want to get a hold or in front of innovation.
Yeah, there's the aspect of standardization, but the Unicode Consortium is more than a standards development organization. It is also a joint development organization. And there's some things that, I mean, when we use the word standard, in certain contexts that has a particular meaning, right? And Cathy was referring to it in a particular meaning. But you can also think of, well, something that we build together that we all end up using together. And I think that comes back to what we were talking about earlier. If you wanted to start up a project that involved ML in some way, well, that starts with some people from different companies coming together saying, hey, I've got this idea. And I think that mutually we could all benefit from this. What do you all think? If we tried to start a project, would you, Company X, be willing to participate and contribute to this? If so, let's figure out how to actually get the project started, and whether that, that could be in the context of the Unicode Consortium. You could do it elsewhere. In many cases, there could be good benefits of doing it in the context of the Unicode Consortium. I have a particular project in mind. I won't go into details, but over the last few years, I've thought, okay, well, where would be a context for this? And, I've got a colleague at Microsoft who, he's an IP attorney, and he has set up a very simple framework that I could start up a project under the Linux Foundation very quickly. But I look at the project and I think, well, there may be a number of reasons why it would actually be a lot of benefits to start it up in the Unicode Consortium. So if that makes sense, then start figuring out how could we make that happen.
Yeah. A few years ago, I was part of some board committee discussions, Unicode board committee discussions, where we talked about, and some board members were really excited about machine learning at the time. We weren't using the term AI as much. We mostly talked about machine learning and trying to think of where Unicode could productively do something. And there were ideas about collecting data and providing data for certain kinds of things like linguistic processing, like word lists and suffixes and grammatical rules and things like that. That didn't go anywhere, and I think it mostly didn't go anywhere because, in my mind, a successful project wants a use case. and we didn't have a use case, and we didn't have someone who had a specific idea. It was sort of vaguely, oh, we should do something about ML. And that I have seen those kind of things a number of times. They sometimes go somewhere if people actually come up with something specific, but what I've seen works best is when you have a problem to solve and you work towards solving it. And then we get things like, oh, in segmentation, like what Shane talked about, when you do word boundaries between Chinese words and Thai words and Khmer words, machine learning can do a good job and can oftentimes do a good job with less data than a brute force dictionary with some kind of matching algorithm. The inflection working group is using data partly from other sources, including like Wikidata, and also then, I believe, contributing back to Wikidata when they have additional material. So maybe we don't have to be the owners of the data, but we have to be careful with licensing. But the inflection working group wasn't just chartered with randomly looking at machine learning. They were chartered with looking at inflection and certain aspects of inflection and trying to figure out how to solve those. And some of them, they can work with rules that engineers can hard code and linguists can help with. And some of it benefits from machine learning. So when we have a concrete problem and ideas for concrete solutions, that's when we can get a project started. And if there are additional problems to be solved and use cases, we can start new projects.
The machine learning space is interesting just because there are so many people in so many different places thinking about it. Earlier this year, I was at a UNESCO hosted event in Paris. It was called Language Technology for All. It's part of the International Decade of Indigenous Languages. And there was a lot of discussion about AI, machine learning related topics, and a lot of that pertaining to what in that space is often referred to as limited resource languages. And toward the end of the conference, there was a presentation by a group from Iceland. I think it's a government of Iceland sponsored agency. And they talked about work that they were doing around ML for Icelandic. And then they said they had signed a memorandum of understanding with UNESCO, and signing an MOU with UNESCO is not a small process on the UNESCO side, right? So they'd gone through the effort to create an MOU with UNESCO to work together to create some industry consortium to build resources around AI for limited resource languages. And when I heard that, I thought, well, this is interesting because UNESCO is well connected with governments and not at all well connected with industry, right? On the other hand, we've got Unicode Consortium, which is very well connected with industry, not very well connected with governments. And so I thought, oh, I wonder if what they have in mind, if Unicode might be a sensible context for that. But you have to come back to the question that Markus asked. What's the problems to be solved? And does it make sense? Is this the right venue to try to solve those problems? There are a lot of other places where people are trying to do machine learning projects for low resource languages or large resource languages. And can you attract enough attention into one context? Or are you competing with lots of other projects? Again, is there a particular problem that we can solve and that we can attract the right interest to solve it here?
I feel bad that we are talking and Annemarie doesn't get a chance. Have you explored machine learning AI in your areas,
You mean for CLDR?
for example?
Well, I mean, I always enjoyed the line wrapping thing. I was involved in the discussions in the Japanese line wrapping using ML for ICU, right?
Yep.
So I think the one thing that I would love to see, but I think is a really hard thing to do, is to figure out how we can actually use LLMs to kind of query corpuses to actually figure out what common usage is, because that is where we spend a lot of time investigating, is what is common usage. And in the space of CLDR, the common locale data repository, common usage really matters and hard to discover.
Okay, what advice would you have for current grad students new to this field on how to best prepare for a job after graduation in this field?
That's an awesome question. I think all of us have been through these waves of disruption, although I don't think we've been through anything as what is going on in the job market right now. My career has been super crooked. I have come back to internationalization standards. I think this is my 4th iteration, and a few times I wasn't even, it was literally given to me, which was kind of funny. But I did a lot of other things along the way. And so I would say, think about the principles that are going to be important to you in a job versus, say, a particular title or a particular set of skills. Be prepared to learn, keep learning your skills. I think the folks that have struggled the most, especially in industry, have been those ones who are like, I am this type of developer. I work with this type of programming language. I am a technical writer. I do this. And so much of their idea of a job is tied up in this specific moment in time versus recognizing that this wave of change is coming on. The folks who I think have struggled the most have kind of had that mindset. Not to shill Satya Nadella too much, but it's this whole fixed mindset versus... Thank you. I've only been gone 2 years for Microsoft, and I can't remember. But in any case, this growth mindset, how do I keep learning, is a big part of it. I know is kind of trite, but think about the area you want to be in and spend some time on that.
Well, I think, too, what are the key characteristics of work that I want to do? I remember years ago, Simon Earnshaw asking me, so one of our managers in our group in Microsoft asking, what's it more important to you, the projects that you work on or the people that you work with, right? And that can be the kind of question that you want to ask to decide, all right, well, what's the direction? I've got a choice. Which is the direction that I want to choose in this fork in the road? And you'll want to think of various questions like that in your decision. I like, Cathy's comment about having a growth mindset, looking for what's changing and where is there something that's coming along that I can find interesting, because I don't want to work on stuff that I don't find interesting. That's one of my important things.
I personally always enjoy reading whenever people are writing about how to measure knowledge work and stuff around this. And there's actually a professor at I think it's Georgetown, whose name is Cal Newport, and he kind of writes about how people find what they do. And I don't know, he's fun to read. So a bit off topic, but it goes back into your kind of growth and I think a lot of it talks about how people sometimes get into these really niche jobs.
I think about, I was talking to Morgan earlier and I was asking, have you had a chance to talk to students at some of the other schools? Just to hear, what are they studying and what are their programs like? Take advantage of the opportunity to learn about, what are other opportunities? Because maybe I'm going down this path right now, and maybe actually that might be another path I might want to consider instead, right?
Yeah, I think what you see here in this workshop is presentations by a rare breed of people that somehow manage to specialize in a field and oftentimes work on it for 20 years or longer. I think that's, well, it's true for me, it's true for several of us, but I think it's really unusual. And I think this has happened partly because other people were not interested in doing this work, right? There is not a great pool of people that have wanted to do ITN work. It's like I became suddenly the Unicode expert on my team in the 90s because no one else really got interested in when they had the training session for that. For me, this was fascinating, and I gravitated to it. For everyone else, it's like, what the heck? I don't want to work on this. But I didn't expect this to stick. I just got out of college in the 90s thinking, I would love to work on something that people can see shrink-wrapped on their shelves, when that was a thing. And I just happened to start with a company that I had an internship with, and I managed to translate the internship into a job. So internships, I think, are often a good springboard. But I just basically did something that was kind of interesting in the internship and then at my job, and that was mobile computing, where, oh my God, you could sit in a park and actually connect to an email server of your company. And in the 90s, that was a big deal. Nowadays, we don't think about that. But I just happened to sort of shift into, on my mobile computing project, I got into Unicode and ITN. And then later, I found a job in a team that specialized on that. So I totally shifted my focus. I had no plan on doing that. I didn't know that ITN work even existed or what to do with that. I just learned a skill, and then that became a job. It could have gone another way. It could have also fizzled away, that whatever the team I got into could have fizzled out, and I would have had to look for something else. And that's where you just have to sometimes be flexible and figure out, okay, this doesn't work anymore, but I've done this kind of thing before. Can I connect with a different team?
You've really hit on something super, super important, especially in tech, is there are going to be these moments in disruption. Your org gets blown up. The mandate changes for your executive, and all of a sudden you're scrambling to figure out what your next role is. And the pivot is exactly the right word, is can you find something that you would like to do, that perhaps you've got one foot in something you understand really, really well, but then you pivot into something else. I took a marketing job at one point in time, in part because, one, I couldn't find anything else, and two, it was a job in standards marketing, and they said, you know something about standards, and we can't hire a marketing person and teach them standards, so we're going to teach you how to be a marketer. Was it my most favorite job? No. Did it get me on a path where I eventually wanted to go? Yes. And that's the other thing, is not every job is going to be amazing, awesome, but hopefully it gets you that incremental path to where you want to go next.
Awesome. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, here it comes. First of all, I love that Cathy described her career as crooked.
It totally has been. Look where I am today.
So my thought is if you look at the conference this year, we had 40 plus students who attended. So I think maybe the paradigm has shifted a little bit, in that we do have a significant group of people who are now interested in learning about I18N, and the challenge they're having is how they do it. And so we also, at the same time, have a lot of people who've been working in the field for a long time who maybe will not be working in the field for a long time longer. And so my question is, how does Unicode scale? How do we both continue the effort, and how do we make it bigger?
So one thought on that. I mean, I think that's a fantastic question, because you're right. I don't think I'm going to be doing this work 25 years from now, right? No, I don't think so. And it'll be different 25 years from now. It'll be different 10 years from now. And we need to, there needs to be bridging, right? We need to have opportunities for people that are now grad students and wanting to get into industry, and to bring them into our industry and help them learn the way things are being done today, but allow them to think about how things could be done differently. We had, and I'll give an example, within the Unicode Technical Committee, we had a young guy come in, he started participating, I don't know, 5 years ago maybe, and originally, like he thought, oh, all these older people working at these big tech companies, like they're going to be kind of fixed in their ways, and I need to be very cautious in what I try to suggest. And one of the challenges we were dealing with had to do with Mongolian script. And you know, he was interested in it, and he started investigating, and he was trying to explain to some of us, okay, here's some of the challenges. And I asked the question, what if this was encoded like Arabic? And he said, oh, well, all the problems would go away, right? But he was really struck that I asked the question, because he imagined, like he never imagined I would have asked that question. Now, in practice, we couldn't redo in Mongolian to be like Arabic, but we were creating the opportunity to think outside the box. And that's someone who has become very involved in the work of the Unicode Technical Committee. And he's been one that has been pushing us to change the way some things have been done. And I think that's been really valuable. Now, has it always been easy? No, not necessarily. But it's been important that we do that. And it's going to continue to be important. And it's going to be important not just for the work of the Unicode Technical Committee or the Unicode Consortium in general, but it's also going to end up being important for software companies in the way that they do work. When I listen to the folks from ByteDance and talk about how they're doing things, and I think about, well, how does Microsoft do this? How does it compare? It's not the same, right? And could it have been done like that at Microsoft? Yeah, but it's sort of 25 years too late to have introduced that approach in Microsoft. Maybe Microsoft will eventually learn that it needs to adjust, right? So look at the opportunities. We need to find opportunities to get people plugged in, but once you're plugged in, find the opportunities to ask outside the box questions, right? What if it could be done this way? Be prepared for some reactions, like, oh, no, we can't do it that way. But try to look for the people who are willing to say, what if we could do it that way? And it's going to take time, but you could have those conversations. So I've been dominating this question. Other people may have some thoughts.
So I think at least for the technical committee that I'm on, we've actually been trying to make it easier for people to contribute without attending the technical committee. So for example, there is the DDL working group, which focuses on digitally disadvantaged languages. And one of the things they have been focusing on is streamlining the process for creating organizations, because if we have more organizations, then we have the ability for more languages to be contributed in the survey tool, right? And that may be beyond the set of that regular members care about. And so potentially this is another way where we can help get more people involved and let us know where there are more issues with somewhat limited resources.
I know we're a little over time. I want to add two things. Number one, we've been grappling with the succession story for years, and I think we've gotten on a good path because we had several people approaching or exceeding retirement age, and sometimes being valuable contributors beyond being employed anywhere. That's been useful, but also scary because we had single points of failure in the organization, and we have consciously worked on that. We have basically gotten other younger people into doing the work and learning how to do the work, getting involved and spreading what we do across multiple people so that we don't have these single points of failure anymore, if possible, more documentation, processes that allow multiple people to contribute to stuff and pick pieces so that not everyone is overwhelmed. The second thing I wanted to just briefly toss out is I think we are not working a lot in public. A lot of the work you see only after the fact when we publish a document or we publish a report or we publish action items or we publish the new data. The work mostly happens nowadays in committees and working groups. And some of that is in sort of closed meetings or closed mailing lists and closed repos. But if you are at all interested in something, try to find someone who is on a working group in a committee and just start observing. Maybe just ping people, talk to them. And once you start observing and say, oh, this is something that I could help with, something that I could contribute to, you could become an active participant and then get in. Don't be shy asking us, other people that you meet here, about getting a foot in the door. If you're interested in properties or languages, CLDR, all kinds of different work, code, fixing bugs and stuff like that, join, observe, look how stuff is done. If something fits, see if you can chime in and contribute. And don't be afraid to ask questions where the first reaction is, no, we don't do it that way.
I definitely recommend asking questions.
Yes.
Thank you all.